Number 10. ORCHIS. ORCHIS is by far one of the most important, newest X-Men villainist groups that you need to know. If there is anything you take away from this list, this team should be one of them. ORCHIS is basically the group trying to do such dastardly things as create the Mother Mold so that they have an endless supply of Sentinels to help defend humanity against the ever-growing threat of mutants. ORCHIS is also surprisingly made up and funded by other organizations, some of which are more villainous in terms of their heritage, while others are actually known for being more heroic instead. ORCHIS made their first appearance early on in House of X issue number 1 back in 2019. They were created by Jonathan Hickman and Pepe Larraz. Number 9. Horticulture. One of my all-time favorite new villainous groups to hit the scene. Horticulture is a team of extremely scientific botanists who made the decision to revolt against the corporations that they worked for. Their members also just so happen to be elderly ladies. Their plan is to reclaim the Earth and revive it as it is dying because of the very industries that they worked in. They aim to take control of plant life so that they can decide who gets fed and who gets dead, controlling the world through the food supply, basically. They also have big beef with the X-Men. Horticulture made their first appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 3. Horticulture was created by Jonathan Hickman and Lionel Francis Yu. Number 8. Pale Girl. The Pale Girl was one of the first villains we'd come up against in the current newest run of Wolverine. That is volume 7 overall of the Wolverine series, the 2020 series, what I'm talking about here. I can't believe it's been over 2 years since this series started. That is madness to me. The Pale Lady was initially believed to be a hallucination brought on by drugs, but was later revealed to be herself a mutant, Meredith Milley, whose powers allowed her to control the minds of others. It was also revealed that she was the one behind the flower cartel, which was illegally transporting and selling a powerful drug made from the pollen of Krakoan flowers. The Pale Girl first made her appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 1. She was created by Benjamin Percy and Adam Kubert. Number 7. The Blob. The Blob is a villain that we don't often get to talk about on these supervillain lists. He tends to fall by the wayside, but truly he's pretty unstoppable. And when he puts his mind to something, or when he puts his body to something, he's a terribly tough villain to defeat, or even move. The Blob was one of the first villains to appear in the original X-Men series, and when he did, he gave the team of youngsters a really tough time. He also attacked them with a circus. The Blob actually didn't start out as a villain, but became one due to the influence of Professor X and the X-Men themselves. Also, just thinking back and the amount of times that the X-Men have fought circuses or been trapped in circuses, or that happens a lot. That's like a recurring theme. Initially, the X-Men attempted to recruit the Blob, but after the Blob refused to accept their offer, he managed to escape before Xavier could wipe his mind of their identities. This caused problems later on down the road, but really it was how the X-Men treated him after he refused to join, and kind of his own self-esteem, and then later his overcompensating sense of superiority that turned him into a villain. I wonder if the Blob actually could have been an ally if this whole scenario had just gone a little bit differently. The Blob is super strong, durable, and virtually immovable thanks to his ability to manipulate gravitational mass, which is pretty powerful. He also later gained a secondary mutation which gave him a liquid form, but he hasn't really exhibited a ton of control with his secondary power set. But he also has liquid form. That's on the resume of powers now. Number 6. Swordbearers of Arakko. The Swordbearers of Arakko were the chosen sword-bearing champions who fought on the side of Arakko and Amenth against Krakoa in the Otherworld tournaments. Overall, they performed very well in the contest between those two nations, even considering how bizarre some of Saturnine's challenges and competitions were. Like a fashion show. That was a thing that happened. They were led by Genesis as Annihilation and joined by Bay the Blood Moon, Death and War of the original Four Horsemen, Apocalypse and Genesis' children, Iska the Unbeaten, Genesis' sister, Pog Urpog, one of my favorites, Redroot the Forest, Solem, Summoner, grandson to Apocalypse and Genesis, the son of War, and White Sword of the Ivory Spire. They made their first appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 6, and were first referred to in Ten of Swords creation, issue number 1. The group was created by Jonathan Hickman and Tinny Howard. Number 5. Moira X. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have succeeded. Even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer it to those who wanted it, Destiny knew that any mutant cure would essentially become weaponized and then forced on mutants, regardless of their own wants and desires. For those who haven't been when reading along recently with the events of the current X-Men line of comics, it was revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose powers were basically reincarnation in her own form. Basically, she dies and then she comes back to life as like a baby and lives her life again. But when Moira dies, she ends up being reborn as herself, but with all the memories of that past life. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of 616, which also seems to be tied to Moira's current life, which I believe is her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a gun of Forge's design, which basically turns mutants into humans. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information, and it was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being like their last hurrah in terms of Moira's plan. Time will tell if Moira becomes more villainous, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just based on where she was heading in this story. And when or if that does happen, you better watch out. Number 4. Nameless the Shapeshifter Queen. While this villain was pretty short-lived, especially considering how hype she seemed. I mean, she is called the Shapeshifter Queen. She is still a pretty important villain for you to be familiar with if you are a fan of X-Men Storm. Storm has been doing a lot of cool stuff lately in the comics, but one of the most epic things to have come her way has been taking her seat as Regent of Planet Arakko, and becoming a queen in a sense once more. Region. Sorry, Storm. In order for her to earn her seat among the rest of the Great Ring of Arakko, she had to take down Nameless. The two fought to determine if Storm would take the seat, and Storm actually won the fight. She offered mercy to Nameless, but instead, the Shapeshifter Queen decided to use Storm's power, as she had adopted Storm's form in battle, to end her own life. Which seems to have stuck with Storm, who was caught lost in thought thinking back to that battle in X-Men Red issue number 1. Nameless made her first appearance in the 2021 Sword series in issue number 8. She was created by Al Ewing and Goyo Villanova.
Coming number 3, Mojo. Making his first debut in Longshot issue number 3, Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of TV entertainment for the universe. We're getting close to these cosmic vibes with Loki's show on Disney+, so I don't think a live-action Mojo is far-fetched. The more viewers he gets for his interdimensional TV show, the more powerful that he becomes. So in 1992, the issue titled Mojo's Media Madness had this wild storyline where Mojo gets Rogue, Cyclops, Beast, and Wolverine to think that they are characters from The Wizard of Oz. I would sell my soul to see this show. I mean, but for now, the comic will have to do. This takes place in X-Men issue number 10. Mojo is a unique villain. He's part of a race of spineless beings from a planet named after him called Mojo World, inside a pocket dimension called the Mojoverse. So this race of spineless beings were slowly going crazy over time because TV signals from another space-time continuum were scattered into their timelines. He's a powerful sorcerer, and we're not exactly sure just how far his magic can go, and I don't really want to find out, to be honest.
Number 2. Moira X. While Moira McTaggart has been known for years as an ally to mutant kind, the whole line of X books kind of changed the way that we see her. Way back in the days of Dawn of X, within House of X, we learned that Moira was actually a secret mutant herself. Her powers allowed her to reincarnate, meaning after she died, she would be born in the same body again, getting to live out her life once more with the knowledge of the previous lives that she'd lived before that. Moira, upon learning she was a mutant in one of her past lives, sought a cure for her condition, wanting to be normal, and to give that option to other mutants the world over that maybe, just wanted to be normal. However, Destiny and Mystique stopped her, blowing up her lab and killing her with fire, warning Moira that creating a cure wouldn't be so easy, and that she was naive to think that it would only be offered to those who wanted it. As such, Moira made other more discreet plans for how to kinda end mutant kind, because she didn't really like it, even though she kind of pretended to like it. By building a paradise for the mutants, that was her plan. She orchestrated this in her current life, with her overall objective kind of being to separate mutants and create the perfect society where they could slowly die out. When Destiny returned, however, she and Mystique saw right through Moira and revealed that she was still, just as ever, an enemy to mutant kind. So despite the fact that Moira is an older character, this revelation of her being a potential antagonist for mutants was pretty new. These revelations came to light in the Inferno series in 2022. Number 1. Albert CARY. Albert CARY is one of the newest villains on the scene and has recently made his first appearance in the X-Force 2022 annual. Here he appears as a scientist working for ORCHIS. That's right, it all comes back to ORCHIS in the end, baby. While we don't know too much about him, as he just made his first appearance, he did go up against Wolverine, Domino, and Quentin Quire's Kid Omega. His plan was to do a short burst of tests on the captured mutants after luring them into a trap. He planned on them dying during said tests, but on keeping the data of said tests to learn from, basically. Well, they stole the motherboard, which stored information for the potential devices and stratagems they were testing. Albert CARY, who seemingly ran the test, is confident that with time they can actually rebuild what they lost, and more vital, they now actually have more information, which opens up new knowledge and possible future questions and experimentation as a result. We don't really fully know what he's up to, but he seems to be testing a new weapon, and from what we've seen of ORCHIS, you can bet that this is likely just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what CARY and ORCHIS will have in store. I'm sure we will see him again. We'll definitely see ORCHIS again, that's for sure.
Coming in number 10, Deadpool. Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. What a ride. This issue was released August 2012, and just the front cover is bloody goodness. What happened here was the X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to heal his insanity. The doctor just happened to be Psycho Man, of course, so he brainwashed Wade with plans to shut down all of his inner voices, which worked, but now these voices were replaced with voices that were encouraging him to, well, kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. Reed then gets left all rubbery and lifeless, and it's pretty dark overall. As far as X-Men villains go, this version of Wade was made a tad more intimidating than X-Men Origins Wolverine, just a tad. Coming number 9, Storm. Aurora Monroe made her debut in Giant Size X-Men issue number 1. She's one of the more popular members of the X-Men, being portrayed by Halle Berry and Alexander Shipp. She was recruited by Charles and joined the team to save other original students from Krakoa. She was appointed leader after several years of work. In X-Men Apocalypse, we see her recruited as a horseman, but by the end of the movie she betrays him and joins the X-Men. But as far as powerful X-Men villains, I can't not look for a reason to include Storm. She's Omega, and when she's on the wrong side of the fight, it can get messy. Coming number 8, Wolverine. Wolverine has a rough past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark paths as well. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's stressful, it's gory, and it's very upsetting to most. But I mean, that's Wolverines going at it, so it sounds about right. In the Age of Apocalypse storyline, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine go against Sabretooth in order to see who would become the new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top, and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Quite the deal if you ask me. To make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a Skrull so the X-Men wouldn't even notice. So there's a few comics here that could blend nicely into the MCU, like Apocalypse replacing Wolverine with a Skrull. That is totally possible. With Ryan Reynolds confirming the next Deadpool would have included Logan, I doubt there isn't some sort of that coming with him for Deadpool 3. They're basically best friends in real life. Adam Sandler has like 14 of his friends every movie, so I'm holding out hope for Logan.
Number 7, Hominis Verendi. Hominis Verendi are an enemy to all mutants, but their main beef lies with the Marauders. The Marauders are one of my favorite mutant teams, especially among the new books that we've had. Honestly, one of the best books around, I think, just in general. If you haven't read Marauders yet, you need to do that. Hominis Verendi is actually made up of a group of kids who were once members of the Hellfire Club's inner circle, but they aren't the only ones to join the Hominis Verendi, although they are the main folks as they pretty much run it as the kings and queens of that organization. Well, the Hellfire Club itself has become much more altruistic and is now run by Emma Frost, Captain Kate, formerly known primarily as Kitty Pryde, and Sebastian Shaw. Hominis Verendi is like their evil reflection. They seek to destroy mutant kind and Krakoa's reputation.
Coming number 6, STRYFE. Making his debut in New Mutants issue number 87, STRYFE was the clone of Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. He's a clone of Cable from the future. He has this high-tech armor, he's a telepathic and telekinetic mutant, and unlike Cable, who has to devote his psionic powers to ensure this techno-organic virus doesn't get his right side as well, STRYFE doesn't need to worry about that issue. Apocalypse wanted this child, he wanted to raise the clone himself, so down the road he could one day claim the body as his own.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise he's gone down a few dark roads. In the movie Logan, we see two Wolverines battling it out, and it's glorious and it's gory. It's so gory. In Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. It's a great comic. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes the new Horseman. Wolverine of course came out on top, and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Quite the deal if you ask me. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a Skrull so the X-Men wouldn't notice. So there's a few comics here that could blend nicely into the MCU, like Apocalypse replacing Wolverine with a Skrull. This is totally possible, with Ryan Reynolds confirming that the next Deadpool would have included Logan on this road trip. That plus the fact that they're best friends in real life. I mean, Adam Sandler has like 15 of his friends in every movie, so I'm sure they're planning to bring Logan in with Deadpool in that deal in some way, shape, or form. Would it be Apocalypse making him evil? Probably not, but never say never. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be so helpful. It helps our channel out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Tap that thumbs up. Let's keep this video going. Number 9, PYRO. PYRO was once a student at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. And in X-Men 2, we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. He's having a great time just hanging out with some super students. But by the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. In the comics, St. John Allardyce made his first appearance as PYRO in X-Men 141. He was born and raised in Australia, and his powers, well, as you could probably guess, has something to do with fire. When he was young, he met Mystique, and then he ended up joining her new brotherhood of evil mutants. We need more fire bad guys, plain and simple. We have none in the MCU. I mean, we had some kind of with Spider-Man Far From Home, but that was all just Mysterio being Mysterio. Number 8, Shadow King. Making his first appearance in X-Men 117, the Shadow King is a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness. Spawned, of course, by the first Nightmare. Amal Farouk was the leader of an underground syndicate located in the Thieves' Quarter of Cairo, Egypt. He's a powerful mutant who also happened to be a vessel for said Shadow King. Farouk was able to control everybody around him, and it's pretty terrifying. He feeds on the shadows of your soul. So yeah, with Marvel now veering off to the cosmic side of things, I think we can get a Shadow King behind the scenes secretly just sucking the life out of our world's finest. In the comics before World War II, Amal Farouk worked with Baron von Strucker to try and destabilize Britain's political structure. So maybe this guy has been here the whole time and he's just been lurking in the shadows. We just don't know it yet. I mean, he is the Shadow King. We're not going to really see him. He's here right now. He's been here the whole time.
Number 7, ORCHIS. ORCHIS is a combination of a variety of government organizations, some more noble than others. The money and structure behind ORCHIS has been provided by such iconic organizations as AIM, SHIELD, and STRYKE primarily, with smaller investments belonging to organizations such as SWORD, Alpha Flight, Hammer, Armor, and even Hydra. The goal of ORCHIS is to protect humanity from growing global threats, which in this case involve mutants. Their plotting caused Professor X to create a task force to stop the creation of a mother mold, which he and Moira McTaggart believed would be the beginning of the end for mutants in regards to the Nimrod tech that the mother mold would produce. However, we later discovered in the new X-Men series that the work of scientist Alia Gregor, who is affiliated with ORCHIS, proves that this assumption may have actually been wrong, and that Nimrod tech may continue to be a threat to the X-Men even with the mother mold destroyed. Also, now Alia's got an even bigger hate on for the mutants and the X-Men after the death of her husband, which happened when the mutant team infiltrated the ORCHIS space station and destroyed the mother mold.
Number 6, STRYFE. Making his debut in New Mutants issue 87, STRYFE was the clone of Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor, Cable. So we just saw Cable as a new main character slash villain in Deadpool 2, and he was played by Josh Brolin. So I don't think he'll be coming to the MCU. Or at least if he does, they may have to do it with this way, with STRYFE. That way they can bend the original story and use alternate futures however they please, with the character more or less staying true to the comics. He's a clone of Cable from the future. He has this bad armor, he's a telepathic and telekinetic mutant, and Cable, who has devoted his psionic powers to basically ensure that this techno-organic virus doesn't get his right side as well, STRYFE doesn't need to worry about that, so he's OP. He's an OG who is OP. The MCU could for sure use STRYFE. The timelines are getting quite intricate, so it can be explainable, and we'll buy it if STRYFE comes in. We'll definitely buy it.
Number 5, SOLEM. SOLEM is one of the new hotties on the X-Men villain block. That would be fun to imagine, just all these hot X-Men supervillains as neighbors. Sounds like a chaotic good time. SOLEM is a mutant of Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was the one mutant we thought would face off against Wolverine, but in an unexpected turn, SOLEM didn't even really fight at all. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was was Saturnine's tournament and it was gloriously weird. Instead though, SOLEM used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to hell to get their Muramasa blades to use in said tournament, making Wolverine tap in and fight on his behalf. SOLEM is presented as being a smooth talker, master manipulator, and overall tricksy kind of person. Maybe that's why I like him so much?
Number 4. Dark Phoenix. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. Seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. I mean, come on guys, it's X-Men 101. Literally, the issue you can find this in is X-Men 101. I am Phoenix. Boom. Okay, so this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that killed like billions of people. We just finished watching Wanda have the breakdown of a century every Friday for weeks, so we'll gladly watch Jean Grey deal with the Phoenix Force in a similar fashion. Totally. Now, with the fact that Jean Grey wasn't the one to do these evil acts and she was being used as a vessel, rings a bit too close to Wanda's story, but never say never.
Number 3. Madeline Pryor. I mean, y'all know how I feel about Maddie. Madeline Pryor is probably one of my favorite X-Men villains around, especially because you can't help but feel for her if you know her backstory. Often referred to as the Goblin Queen, a lot of what makes Maddie so hot is just her dominant energy. She is a woman who gets what she wants no matter the cost, which has obviously driven her to do some pretty terrible things. The really tragic thing about Maddie though is that at the end of the day, she really just wants to be seen and loved and accepted, and it's like everything she does to try and get what she wants almost pushes her further away from happiness. She is the very epitome of the quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." She's deadly, dangerous, usually very unhinged, often filled with rage, but also very tragic. What is there not to love here? She's just so complex. I love characters that are complex. If you're a complex character in a comic, you're probably hot to me.
Number 2. Scarlet Witch. No more mutants. Scarlet Witch, aka Wanda Maximoff, she's the daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, aka Ralph Boner, aka Pietro Maximoff. Now, she was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but at one point she did join the Avengers as well, of course. She's one of Marvel's biggest heroes and she's trending every single Friday for a reason. And then in Marvel's M Day, she kind of became the ultimate evil when she spoke those 3 words, and just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered or killed. That large number being 986,618, give or take. Only leaving a couple hundred left on the planet. WandaVision was great because we finally got to see the Scarlet Witch. We saw this villain side to her. And I'd be happy to see more at any time, especially with more mutants now on the way. And number 1, Magneto. Of course, number 1, this is the most ideal scenario. I'd love for this to happen. He made his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963. Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a few disagreements over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. And his horrible childhood makes a pretty fair point for said argument. He created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes, and he worked with the X-Men before. When Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and continued to teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way, guiding the New Mutants, but again, he's one of those guys that constantly flips back and forth in the comics. And for a while, fans, including myself, were hoping that Magneto was going to be the one behind WandaVision's madness somehow, or he would come in from another universe and then explain to Wanda what's going on and be the bearer of bad news almost. I think Magneto should still be one of the first mutants introduced, especially if they go Ultimate Magneto, because he actually takes out Xavier in those comics, and also thousands of people as well. So there's that. He would be a cool villain to come over, definitely.
Number 10. Children of the Vault. The Children of the Vault are their own race who seek to rule the world. They are neither mutants nor humans, though they did evolve from the human race. The children are part of a race that descended from humans, having been technologically evolved over the course of 6,000 years. They believe only one race should rule Earth and plan on becoming said race. One of their members, Seraphina, recently resurfaced in the Dawn of X-Men series, having escaped from ORCHIS, who had somehow captured her. Before Wolverine could catch her though, she returned to the Vault, where she was also seen rejoining the other children. Number 9. Phalanx. So the Phalanx are kind of complex. If you are familiar with the Phalanx, it's probably because you are familiar with the Annihilation Conquest story arc from 2007 to 2008. The Phalanx work basically to destroy matter and upload it to a hive mind of data using the techno-organic virus, assimilating all organic and inorganic matter that they come across in the universe. So they're basically like the Technarchy, but the Phalanx share a collective mind, where the Technarchy are individuals. Phalanx aim to absorb all matter in the universe and eventually managed to threaten all of Earth and mutant kind respectively. It is only through Moira's regeneration abilities that we know the great risk this hive mind tech race could pose and has posed to the X-Men and all of life before, in a previous one of Moira's lives. Number 8. The Supremacy. The Supremacy sought to take down and defeat the X-Men in an alternate future. We learned a bit more about them in Powers of X. They were the ones behind Nimrod the Lesser and eventually Nimrod the Greater, and their library of Homo sapiens and mutants alike. After years of breeding mutants in camps to use as their slaves and hounds to fight against their own kind who had revolted, they went a step further, literally dissolving mutants in tanks of femto fluid until they were reduced to nothing but the data that comprised them. Ugh. They would then be stored in a great library where the data that their corpses provided could be used to win the war against mutant kind. Eventually, the war became obsolete, however, making this whole process and the library that stored this data almost eerily useless, which is creepier. Don't put me in femto fluid, please. Number 7. Lady Mastermind. Mastermind himself is maybe one of the least attractive villains to me. Maybe it's the way that he operates, manipulating people's minds, or maybe it's just his really whiny nature in the original X-Men comics, or the fact that then he really couldn't take no for an answer, constantly attempting to win Scarlet Witch over to no avail. However, his daughter on the other hand, Reagan Wingard, aka Lady Mastermind, is a certified hottie. 1, she's just overall more physically attractive, to me anyways, but 2, she is also less whiny than her dad in general, which I also like. This might possibly be because she is more powerful than him and she doesn't really feel the need to prove how capable she is, so she doesn't get whiny. Of course, it could also be because Mastermind himself has paved the way for his daughter, meaning that her name and her abilities already mean something because of all of her dad has accomplished over time, improving her reputation as a capable villain. So doesn't need to be as whiny. Number 6. Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao is a very wealthy politician who was publicly humiliated by Kate Pride. Yeah, she's dropped Kitty and she's just going by Kate Pride now. And Bishop. She was humiliated when she attempted to blame mutants for her missing husband, who turned out had actually just joined a kind of cult of worshipping and celebrating mutants. So that's kind of awkward for her. Frustrated, she decided to make a very generous donation to anti-mutant organizations and aims to continue her own fight in the war against mutants. She donated to one very specific anti-mutant organization actually, which we'll talk about soon. Number 5. Tarn the Uncaring. Tarn has been a major antagonist throughout the modern X books. Honestly, he's so terrifying, I think he deserves to be a villain to many different mutant supers. He's shown up in both Hellions, acting as a villain against fellow villain, who's still kind of villainous but is supposed to be on the good side, Mr. Sinister, and his team of unlikely heroes, the Hellions. The poor Hellions. I miss them. Tarn also fought against Storm, who has become regent of planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars. Don't worry though, Storm beat him in combat, because Storm's a badass. Even though Tarn sits on the Great Ring of Arakko, their governing body, he still seems like he's always planning something terrible. He's basically like the Arakko version of Sinister, which makes him infinitely more dangerous and overall worse. Tarn made his first appearance in Hellions issue number 6 in 2020 and was created by Zeb Wells and Carmen Carnero.
Coming in number 4, Mr. Sinister. Dr. Nathaniel Essex made his first debut in Uncanny X-Men 221. He's not that easy to forget though once you take a look at him. He's kind of terrifying, well, to say the least. He's obsessed with experimenting on mutants, and yes, that includes himself. He was obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution, but felt like they were shackled by too many moral constraints. He couldn't even get funding from the Hellfire Club, so he had to get together a group that he named the Marauders, and got them to kidnap people off of the streets of London so that he could continue his experiments. Guy is pretty twisted when you think about it. He even tried to experiment on his own son, who just happened to be no longer alive. A villain who resurrects the dead? I mean, the MCU could probably use that right about now.
Number 3. Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly or at least outwardly powerful when it comes to what she's capable of or her power set, and for this reason many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why we'd advise against that. Inferno, issue number 4. In the newest Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the mutant nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands. as Mystique so often does. Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she almost was successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her. Mystique here proves that not only is her power set OP, but really that her mind and sense of cunning is what makes her so dangerous, and definitely not someone to be underestimated.
Coming at number 2, Onslaught. Making his first debut in X-Men issue number 15, Onslaught was a sentient psionic entity created from the minds of Charles Xavier and Magneto. That's pretty messed up. So when the X-Men were fighting the Acolytes, Wolverine hit Magneto, and then in return Magneto ripped the adamantium from his bones, which, gotta say, I thought hangnails were bad. This sounds like an absolute nightmare. His healing factor had to work overtime for sure. Xavier shut down Magneto's mind, which made him catatonic, but during this moment all of Magneto's lust for hate and violence leaked into Charles' consciousness, creating this new personality called Onslaught. He now obtained the ability to tap into the psychic resources of the astral plane, where he could then manipulate matter and energy. There's also a red Onslaught, but I'll save that for another time. Last but certainly not least, our number 1 spot, Apocalypse. Esteban Noor, making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue number 17, was born nearly 5,000 years ago at the edge of the Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt. He was abandoned by his tribe because of the fact that he looked, well, different. He had the Avatar look going on, for lack of a better explanation. He later was raised by the nomads with the idea that only the strong survive, a tough way for a child to think and live. He actually was killed by agents of Ozymandias, but was later revived thanks to his mutant abilities. For example, his self-molecular manipulation allows for him to alter his physical form, and he's also a genius. Even before being modified by the celestial ship, Apocalypse was already living for thousands of years. All he has to do is enter a deep sleep. In the X-Men Apocalypse storyline, we see just how big and bad the guy can get though.
Number 10. VANISHER. An old school villain who also almost single-handedly defeated the X-Men back in the day. Almost. So close. Well, actually he kind of did defeat the X-Men team, but fortunately Professor X butt in to save the day. And he was only able to defeat VANISHER by wiping his mind and making him forget who he was and what he was capable of, which I think goes to show just how powerful of a villain he is. He was the first teleporter the team really encountered, proving just how crazy powerful teleporters are. VANISHER is also considered to be a super fast teleporter, and his power limits thus far have been pretty much undefined, even when he did resurface years later. I would consider him to be at a higher level though, just based on what I've seen thus far. He also was able to teleport himself safely just instinctually, even when teleporting to a place he's never seen or been to before, avoiding teleporting partially or fully into any solid objects, which of course could kill him, and which is like a great danger if you're a teleporter. You just teleport somewhere and now part of you's in a car and you're like, well, I guess I'm dead now. That's it. Number 9. Living Diamond. Okay, so someone I also think we need to talk about who needs some kind of redemption in the comics is Jack Winters, aka Jack O'Diamonds, or Living Diamond. He was one of the first X-Men villains whom Professor X saved Scott Summers from, thereby recruiting him to his X-Men team. Living Diamond's mutant power was believed to be radiation resistance, but he was also shown to be able to teleport short distances, had telepathy, and had a diamond form. Does that sound familiar at all? Telepathy with a diamond form. Somehow Living Diamond was way too easily defeated by a vibration beam which shattered him. I know Living Diamond is dead now and was undead at one point, but I really feel like considering how OP Emma Frost has become, Living Diamond should also get a second chance to prove just how powerful he in theory should be. I mean, if you got all that, how were you so easily defeated? Number 8. Arcade. Arcade is one of those villains who feels super ridiculous with his grandiose plans for Murder World, but in reality when he actually manages to achieve plots like Murder World, he's actually quite scary. I mean, getting a sneak peek into just what a ludicrous and horrifying operation he'd run in Hellions really made me appreciate just how dangerous Arcade can be if he does manage to get enough hostages, that is, to control people into working with him so he can create his Murder World. In Hellions number 9, it's revealed that the trap mastermind X-Men walked the Hellions and prior to that Mr. Sinister into was a trap laid by Arcade himself. Gasp, what a reveal. Arcade's plan was to use Sinister's Hellions as leverage to encourage Sinister to work for him. Sinister didn't really seem to actually care about the Hellions, and he basically just agreed outright, although Arcade still chose to forcefully remove some of his teeth for fun before putting him to work. He wanted Sinister to make clones for him for Murder World, and had his plan worked, it would have been a real horror show. However, Sinister made a counteroffer to Mastermind, and instead the two double-crossed Arcade. Still, that whole 3-issue arc made me believe in the power of Arcade. Like, if he has the right allies, he could be really crazy. I'm here for some sort of plot where Arcade tries to just turn the world into Murder World or something. If that hasn't happened yet, someone write that for me, please. Maybe I should write that down. Maybe I should write that. I don't know. Marvel, call me. I got ideas apparently.
Coming in number 7, Juggernaut. Kay Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. When Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak, so Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol, read the inscription, and possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a literal human Juggernaut. After he dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, getting taken out as well. We've literally seen him rip Deadpool in half, and if he's coming over to the MCU, I hope Juggernaut will as well.
Number 6, Red Death. Also known as Kandra, Red Death currently has a very Scarlet Witch looking vibe going on, and I gotta say, I'm feeling it. And just like Scarlet Witch, she is not someone who you should underestimate. Kandra is part of the Externals, and while she isn't one of the most memorable of that mutant villain team, she's still someone who is super powerful. Technically, just being an External comes with a pretty big dose of power. The Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, a different team entirely, are a group of immortal mutants basically. They have had various roles throughout history. One more prominent one that folks might remember Kandra from is her role as Benefactress, when we learned of her history with Gambit and the Thieves and Assassins Guilds of New Orleans during Gambit's miniseries. In fact, that was actually where Kandra first was introduced in the comics, making her initial appearance in Gambit issue number 1 from the 1993 miniseries. Although the way they approach that introduction, you wouldn't necessarily maybe know that that was her first appearance, because she kind of shows up like, you know me, I'm Kandra. And I'm like, do we know you? Who are you? But it's alright, she's pretty powerful.
Coming number 5, Shadow King. Making his first appearance in X-Men 117, the Shadow King is a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness, spawned by the first Nightmare. Amal Farouk was the leader of the underground syndicate located in the Thieves' Quarter of Cairo, Egypt. He's a powerful mutant who also happened to be a vessel for said Shadow King. Farouk was able to control everybody around him, and it's pretty terrifying when you think about it. He feeds on the shadows of your soul, so yeah, with Marvel now veering off to the cosmic side of things, we could see a Shadow King whenever the X-Men come into the picture. In the comics before World War II, Amal Farouk worked with Baron von Strucker to try and destabilize Britain's political structure. Even more terrifying.
Danger is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a villain who surfaced because they were basically being mistreated by Professor X, who had decided to ignore the fact that the training room had become sentient and was itself a technologically based mutant. Eventually, Danger decided, enough of this shit. It's time to get some sweet, sweet revenge. The crazy thing about Danger is although we don't think of her too much, she really would be a pretty strong opponent to the X-Men considering she trained them, and as such would know their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, I think that even is mentioned in the comics at one point. She was also considered to be an extinction level threat that caused Steve Rogers great worry in Heroic Age X-Men, which is kind of like a glimpse into his tactical commentary diary. So if you wanted to read that, it exists. So despite not thinking about Danger too much, we all probably should in case she ever decides to, go the villain route again. Destroy everyone, because she could probably do that. Extinction level, friends. Number 3, Severe Blackmore. Severe Blackmore is a new villain who recently appeared in Wolverine. He becomes an enemy to Logan after Wolverine tracks him down to learn more about SOLEM. SOLEM is believed to have stolen Wolverine's Muramasa blade, which is why Wolverine's trying to track him down. Wolverine and SOLEM seemingly team up to take down Severe, but instead SOLEM betrays Wolverine, giving him the slip and leaving him to face Severe alone. Fortunately, Wolverine does beat the big Iraqi pirate and even gains possession of Blackmore's beloved and in Emma's opinion, grotesque ship. chip. Sevier made his first appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 14. He was created by Benjamin Percy and Adam Kubert. Number 2. Destiny. Destiny has to be one of the most underestimated villains in recent years in comics. We have seen her resurface as a considerably dangerous villain in the current X books, and I'm personally loving it. Destiny was dead for quite a few years and actually got to mostly stay dead for much of them. Her mutant power allows her to see potential futures. She can see things that might come to pass, and it seems as though the more likely the future becomes, the clearer her vision of it is. She can also see more immediate futures when in the middle of a conflict. It was because of this power and Moira's personal grudge against and fear of Destiny that she remained unresurrected. But something you really shouldn't underestimate when it comes to Destiny is the power of love. Mystique was already told by Destiny before her death that if there came a time when mutants could be resurrected and they refused to bring her back, that Mystique should basically burn this new world to the ground. And Mystique's love of Destiny gave her the motivation to basically bring Krakoa to its knees with her machinations to not only return Destiny but also put her in a position of power. Precogs and love are a powerful mix. Number 1. Madeline Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. Madeline Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno event. Currently in the comics, Madeline Pryor is making a comeback, returning at the end of the Hellion series after being killed as part of the comic's first arc. The Madeline Pryor that was killed was definitely feeling pretty evil and threatened to destroy the entire Hellions team before they even started. The returning Madeline, who has been resurrected by the Five, is at least putting on appearances that she's more level-headed, but in reality it seems the dark side of her still bubbles just beneath. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and she's a clone of Jean, so although she often gets forgotten and downplayed, she really shouldn't be considering just how dangerous and powerful she is, because Jean is also that and Maddie is also that too. She has the potential at least. Often people try to downplay Maddie because she's a Sinister created clone, but that feels very unfair to me. She's also got like a spark of the Phoenix Force in her, so should that count for something? I think so.
Number 7. Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. That cave was actually home to the lost temple of Cyttorak. So Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol, read the inscription, and possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. And then an explosion went off and Kane the Juggernaut was trapped under the rubble and Xavier took off. He got out of there. So after Kane dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, getting taken out as well. I mean, we've literally seen him rip Deadpool in half, and if Deadpool's coming to the MCU, I really hope Juggernaut will as well. After all, last time we saw him in Deadpool 2 at the end of the movie, he was crawling out of that pool. He wasn't actually dead. He was just a little bit injured after Colossus laid him out with the help of some well-placed wires.
Number 4. Apoth. Apoth is the main antagonist of the new Fallen Angel series. While Apoth doesn't directly threaten all of mutant kind or all of X-Men, although at the end they kind of mentioned it like they would be threatening that, they definitely found a strong enemy with one member of the X-Men, Psylocke. Or well, a version of Psylocke anyways. With Braddock and Quanon both being discarded as names for her, Psylocke sets out to seek out her daughter, who had been taken from her years ago when she worked for the Hand. Yeah, apparently she has a secret daughter. That's a thing. And to find a villain called Apoth. Also, I think we can assume because of the whole Hand thing that this Psylocke is Quanon, but she doesn't want us to call her Quanon, so we won't do that. It turns out that Apoth is a god who also kind of has an army of children at their disposal, and that they inhabit two sides of themselves, one light, one dark. Psylocke creates a team and works with Sinister to find and defeat Apoth for her own reasons, not knowing that in fact strings have also kind of been pulled in regards to this upcoming battle and why she's going to do it. Apoth is a powerful and psychic telepathic villain, but still proves to be no match for Psylocke.
Number 3. Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17, it's undeniable how intimidating this Omega level mutant is. This guy is loaded with powers. He can suck the energy from you. Apocalypse can suck the energy out of anything and then use that power to shoot energy blasts or use that power to enhance his own strength and speed. Okay, not a bad start. We could definitely use someone like that in the MCU. And just by looking at Apocalypse, you can see that he's merged with celestial technology. His armor is futuristic, it's fun, this technology is wired throughout his body and also his headquarters, making Apocalypse able to teleport at times. Self-molecular manipulation allows for him to alter his physical form. He can get big, he can get small, whatever the case. He's also a super genius, especially when it comes to advanced technology, that stuff that I mentioned earlier. Even before being modified by the celestial ship, Apocalypse was already living for thousands of years. He just goes into a coma and then heals up. I mean, talk about a beauty sleep, damn. In X-Men Age of Apocalypse from 1995, we see just how big and bad this guy can get. Oscar Isaac had a take on him in X-Men Apocalypse and it was great, that was super fun. Not as scary or big as the comics, but still a good time. So if Marvel needs a new big bad guy besides Kang, I think they should go here next. We love superhero teams fighting big bald guys. I mean, we can't get enough of it. Evidently, we'll pay to see it numerous times.
Number 2, MERC. MERC is a team and organization that was built out of the demilitarization that seems to have happened globally as a result of Krakoa being recognized as a nation. Call it a time of peace or call it an anxious time of reserved resources in preparation for the war to come. But regardless of the cause, MERC is comprised of former top paramilitary soldiers who seek out battle because, you know, they were kinda laid off, and as such have become guns for hire. They are loyal to no nation. They were originally employed by Xeno to fight against the X-Force and X-Men, but may have also more recently been approached by the mutants themselves in regards to their services. So we'll have to wait and see. They were fighting against them, but maybe they can be used. Number 1, Hominis Verendi. While the Marauders might operate separately from the X-Men, they are still comprised of a lot of former and current X-Men members, including one of the original team members, Bobby Drake. And it also includes Storm! Yay! This team is led by Captain Kate and ends up going up against the anti-mutant organization Hominis Verendi, which is comprised of former Inner Circle members of the Hellfire Club. Sort of. Also, can we just acknowledge how great the Hellfire Trading Company is though? Separate of course from Hominis Verendi, but still, they're really cool and I just had to shout them out because yeah, they're really fun. Hominis Verendi were previously known as the unofficial Hellfire Brats and were originally part of the Hellfire Academy. The team also has their own White Queen, Black King, and the like, similar to Krakoa's Quiet Council and the former Hellfire Club. But of course, they're all kids, they're all little non-mutant kids who just want to hate on mutants. Evil children, evil children. Number 10, Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister is a Sinister clone who was implanted into the body of Claudine Renko via a genetic virus. This virus was Mr. Sinister's failsafe should anything happen to him, which of course it did. He ended up being killed during the events of Messiah Complex. Following his death, however, this failsafe was activated, transforming Claudine Renko into a perfect genetic copy of Mr. Sinister, but female. She also possessed Nathaniel's powers and his twisted personality. Claudine no longer existed and in her place was Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister wouldn't last forever and eventually Mr. Sinister would return to the comics, taking her place. Although I do think the idea of female clones of Sinister also existing is just a pretty cool idea, and I still kinda hope we could someday see a version of Miss Sinister brought back in the comics. I'm cool with there being a lot of clones of just Mr. Sinister, but what about some Miss Sinister clones too? That could be cool. All of the Sinisters. Sinister dinosaurs as well. Number 9, Donald Pierce. It's kind of weird really that I think Donald Pierce is attractive, but here we are. Now you know that I'm into the weird Victorian aesthetic of the Hellfire Club. Surprise, surprise. I feel like people that do know me would be not surprised by that at all. And of course I'm generally into that aesthetic, except for when it's being worn by Sebastian Shaw, of course. Sebastian is a brute and I will never forgive him for what he did to Captain Kate and Lockheed. Ugh. Donald Pierce is extremely anti-mutant, but then again, he's also an X-Men villain, and around pretty much half of that group of the X-Men villains are pretty focused on, you know, death to all mutants and that kind of stance. Donald Pierce himself was one of the original members we're introduced to of the Hellfire Club Inner Circle, holding the title initially of White Bishop. He's also part cyborg, which I'm also weirdly fine with. Even robots and, you know, part robots deserve love. Love for cyborgs. This message from Amanda McKnight. Everyone love a robot today. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more hot villains lists, which as I said, I can do that. There's lots of hot X-Men villains, and I know y'all are gonna be in the comments like, what about this person? So let's do a part 2 and let me know you want that by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister might seem like a weird one to include on this list, but have you seen him lately in the comics? He's a complete A-grade hottie. Something about Mr. Sinister with facial hair, just like rocking a beard, just really does it for me. Also, I love capes, and they're not super easy to pull off, so if you can pull off a cape, I think you deserve a spot on this list, which Mr. Sinister consistently does, so here he is. He's also just a really fun and creative villain, for better or sometimes for worse when it comes to plots. And if there is anything that screams hotness for me, it's creativity. I love creativity. Sure, he might be a mad geneticist, but he's a fun mad geneticist, you know what I mean? Number 5. Xeno. Although the creation and unity we have seen from the mutants in the Dawn of X relaunch has allowed them to shut down those programs who would use mutants as test subjects and as a means to advance human evolution, that doesn't mean that the people behind those organizations just disappear. In fact, it seems that instead the few people left who still believe in them have found one another and created a more secretive organization in the shadows known as Xeno. Xeno was the group behind the assassination of Charles Xavier in the X-Force series, and while X was successfully resurrected, Xeno still created quite a shiver of panic among the mutants of Krakoa. This organization will likely continue to pop up as an enemy to mutants and the X-Men throughout the relaunch, and they are ruthless, resourceful, and terrifying in their methods, successfully using the captured Domino's skin to ensure their assassinations team success. Ick. Graphic. Get it? Because they graphed her skin? Ew. Gotta get that luck though, gotta just slap that luck skin onto ya. Number 6. Callisto. With or without her tentacles, I'm just a big fan of Callisto. Callisto was at one point leader of the Morlocks and a villain to the X-Men. She kidnapped Angel and tried to make him marry her, not a great look. Fortunately, I think for both of them, that didn't work out, so yay. Honestly, that would be a weird pairing if it had happened and then still existed now. What would that be like in the future? Callisto for a long time has been a recurring enemy of Storm's. However, currently she's turned from being a villain to just being a straight up badass in the comics. She was depowered during M-Day, but still being a mutant took refuge on Krakoa. She now works alongside the Hellfire Trading Company, acting as Emma Frost's, the White Queen's, White Knight. She also recently got her powers restored after fighting and dying in the Crucible ceremony, asking Storm to fill in for Apocalypse as her own personal challenger. Storm and Callisto are pretty much cool now, so Storm actually did this for Callisto as a kindness, if that makes sense. If you're not reading the comics, it maybe doesn't make sense. Kill them not with kindness, but for kindness in this instance. That's what the Crucible's all about. If you want to know more about the Crucible, there's a whole X-Men issue on it from the last series of X-Men that started in 2019.
Number 5. Mr. Sinister. Dr. Nathaniel Essex made his first comic book debut in Uncanny X-Men 221. And he's not that easy to forget once you take one look at him. So in a world where Sword was taking out Vision and Hydra's doing tests to make mutants in their secret labs, I totally think Mr. Sinister could show up with the X-Men in the MCU. After all, he's obsessed with experimenting on mutants, including himself. He was obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution, but he felt like they were shackled by too many moral constraints. So that doesn't say anything. You're like, okay, this guy's messed. He couldn't get the funding from the Hellfire Club or, Kickstarter wasn't around. So he got together a group that he named Marauders, and then he got them to kidnap people off the streets of London so he can experiment on them himself. He even tried to experiment on his son, who wasn't even alive. So yeah, he's a villain who likes to bring the dead back, so hey, we could always use one of those, for sure.
Number 4. Silver Samurai. Is there anything hotter than a well-trained swordsman and disciplined samurai? Silver Samurai has been a long-time enemy and sometimes frenemy of Logan, and is an iconic X-Men villain because of that. Whenever I think of Silver Samurai, or when I have seen him pop up on Krakoa lately, I always go back now in my mind to issue 3 of Wolverine's 1988 series. In that issue, we get to see him do some training in nothing but his undies and a mask. Oh, and he's wearing wrist bracers too. Gotta protect your wrists. The other thing I really find attractive about Silver Samurai is that despite being a villain, he still keeps to his own moral code, which is why he sometimes will even end up teaming up with his enemies or his rivals. If something is going on that he too does not agree with, he's willing to team up with even his enemies to put a stop to it. He's not too stubborn. And I like that. Number 3. Horticulture. I love these ladies so much. They are basically a villainous eco-terrorist version of the Golden Girls group. They are sassy, elderly women who used to work for corrupt and greedy biotech companies who did not care about the effects of their work in regards to the planet's well-being. As such, these women decided to fight back. They planted their own seeds within the companies, hoping to infiltrate them over time so that they could then have control of all plant life on Earth, deciding what grows and what doesn't. However, with Krakoa's miracle plants and resulting pharma drugs hitting the market as a result of the mutant nation being recognized globally, their plans were kinda threatened. Horticulture formed, and these 4 women, Opal, Lily, Augusta, and Edith, threatened the mutants and Krakoa. They attacked with a green sticky substance that appears to neutralize mutant powers, and vowed to either cause Krakoa to join them, or they would cut them down like the weed they are. I sincerely hope we get to see a lot more of them, or that the mutants decide to team up with them because they're just hilarious and amazing. Number 2. Selene. There is something so timeless about Selene, the way she is often drawn, and even her mannerisms and the way I imagine her voice to sound in the comics. This is probably because, well, she is actually ancient. Something I find very attractive about her is just that, her timelessness, her wisdom. But of course there is also the knowledge that she could drain the life force right out of you, just like that. Selene is an energy vampire who feeds on the life force of others. Her powers pretty much make her instantly a great and deadly villain. An immortal mutant, Selene is also a member of the group known as the Externals, not to be confused with the Eternals. That's a different group. The Externals are an immortal group of mutants who are generally all ancient and are often known for being unstoppable, or at least notoriously hard to kill. Number 1. Mystique. Is anyone surprised that Mystique took our top spot? I know I'm not. For me, it's not even Mystique's outward appearance, whatever she chooses it to be, her standard blue or another version. Mystique is attractive because of her drive. She goes for what she wants and she never gives up. She doesn't usually apologize, and although she's a villain, there are many times she has done things not with malicious intent, but because she thought it was the right thing to do in the end. I love Mystique for so many reasons, but I think the fact that she is a survivor is what I admire the most about her. She often does her own thing for her own reasons, and often to ensure her own survival. There is something so powerful and just so cool about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's also good to think of others and be compassionate. I'm not saying we should all be like Mystique all the time. That would be a lot, but I think there is something admirable in her ability to completely accept herself, unapologetically, and trust in her own ambitions and her own plans. For me, that's what attracts me to a lot of female villains. It's like this rebellion against all the constraints of what it means to be good. It's the anti of what I feel like is expected of me as a woman and just a human in general. And it's fun sometimes to like be the opposite of that, you know? Be good, but then also be bad and be free.